The Somnium Files is a very unique game. One where you solve a murder mystery by diving into the minds of various charming characters. It has a sort of escape room meets dream logic type setup that I haven't really seen before. Although to be fair, I still need to play the creator, Katara Uchikoshi's other games. Either way, with such a unique premise, creating a follow-up would definitely yield some interesting, if a little mixed, results. And after finishing the sequel, Nirvana Initiative, I'd say it definitely meets that mixed but interesting point. I like it, and I think the parts that were improved were done so with flying colors. But it also has a lot of weird quirks. Even with the minor complaints that I do have though, the main gameplay points of I2, the Somniums, have seen a massive uptick in quality. Which is a good thing since it's arguably one of the most important things to improve on. The first game's dreamscapes were already solid. With plenty of things to interact with and secrets to uncover, they represent each character's mind well. Each one really had that sort of miniature puzzle diorama thing down pat. And if they aren't linked to the mystery, then you get a bit deeper of an understanding of the character at least. But the jump between AI1 and Nirvana's Somniums is nothing to sneeze at. Maybe they're not on the level of, say, Psychonauts when it comes to brain-themed games, but honestly, I could make a substantial, short video analyzing almost any of them and it'd be positive. I did say almost any of them, but today I'd like to talk about the one that took me by surprise. When I first met this character, I assumed they wouldn't be too involved in the story. They're just a silly little comedian, what do they know? But as the game progressed, I discovered that this character was involved in the case. More than I could have anticipated. And it was then that I knew this Somnium would take me for a ride. But what I didn't know is just how invested it would get me, both in the mystery and the emotional background of a cube.
Wow, they have it! Cube!
Let's dive into neat info, the Somnium of Andy's Komeji, aka Yonoharu Enda.
Let's start there. If we're gonna talk about Andy's Komeji, we can't miss that place.
Mr. Komeji has quite the layered history, and while his Somnium obviously doesn't explain everything, it represents and gives context to a lot of that history. As Pewter says in the first Somnium Files game, the subject is the author, director, and actor of what's basically a play in their mind, while the sinker, the one who goes into the mind, is more of an observer. But in neat info, the roles get a little bit twisted, but that isn't for no reason. The main method of performing actions in this Somnium are the cue cards, which you use to nudge Komeji into showing how his life was affected by certain actions. This not only turns the Somnium into a more literal play, but it also leans into Komeji's role as a stage performer, all the while serving as a vehicle for the character's emotions. It represents how a lot of the time he doesn't feel like he's in control of his own actions. Be it due to the people in his life, the audience of his shows, or lack thereof, or the loan sharks. Komeji used to be known as the Quiz King. He was sort of a mini-celebrity in what he considers his glory days. But as he took advantage of the situation, and took it for granted, all he was left with career-wise was trying to relive his former glory. But that didn't even come close. He could barely make ends meet when the fame subsided.
I get one show a month and only get 5,000 yen.
Because of this, his wife left him and his son resented him for basically becoming a pushover. He tried to keep up a sense of pride with his comedian job, but he knew he couldn't stay unsuccessful. He wanted to support his son, make enough to keep their living buoyant, but with a low to middle income job and no real skills elsewhere, it feels hopeless for the poor guy. He was practically drowning in guilt that wasn't even entirely his fault. Most of the fault lies in the system of capitalism. With barely enough money to get by, of course he couldn't learn a new skill set. It's all keeping a chokehold on the cube as he tried to keep the few consistent cycles of his life stable.
Komeji's stumbling over his words.
And so he took cues from others, letting his life be piloted around by others, all for that facade of stability, while he was unaware that the puppet strings used on him were being strained and frayed. The way the Somnium is structured reflects the debt Komeji fell into. The investments start small, and you have more time means to help bounce back and mitigate the costs. But the further you fall in, the more pressure is applied, and the less chances you have to dig yourself out of that pit, until it's too late to go back. Of all the games to make a statement on capitalism, I didn't expect it to be this one, let alone with a character that looks like, this. But we're here now, I guess. Honestly, that's one of my favorite things about these games. They hit you where you least expect it.
Now that I've shared my roots, let's head over there.
Another one of my favorite things about Somnium's and Nirvana Initiative is the way that they utilize music to portray the mood of the mind you're in. The use of instruments to portray certain characters or through lines is always appreciated. They can represent hostility, fear, anxiety, all kinds of repressed emotions and buried memories that you dig up through exploring the mindscape. And in this regard, Need Info's theme might be one of the smartest utilizations of music in the game. The way it's able to use a combination of typically comedic instruments like the accordion and harmonica, and twist its melody into such a morose mood is honestly impressive. It's representative of how Komeji, as a comedian, uses his comedy not just to entertain, but to cope with the bad hand that he's been given in life. There's that one bit after the intro, with the escalation of scales in the background, played against instruments that are ever so slightly off key. And the blaring harmonica in the chorus, it gets across the vibe of the character perfectly. Komeji may look all laughs and smiles on the exterior, but inside he's suffering a number of great pains. He can't support his family, having to turn to black market dealings and other dubious activities just to do so. He's hiding all of this turmoil behind a facade that, despite his best efforts to keep up, will have to fall sooner or later.
Interesting. My debt isn't getting any smaller.
But one of my favorite things about the song is the part that plays just before the loop. As the harmonica and accordion start to fade into each other, I feel like it represents how Komeji views his relationship with Shoma. At the beginning bit, they're in harmony, before turning slightly discordant with one another. The harmonica gets louder as Komeji tries to keep things together, even if his son hates him. And then, the accordion fades out completely, leaving the wailing sound of the harmonica right at the tail end, as the father feels like he's completely lost his son.
I want to be successful. I need this money. All for Shoma. I don't care what happens to me, as long as I have my boy.
It works excellently with both paths the Somnium can take. The fear of actually losing your son versus losing touch with your son, trying to keep him safe. And speaking of paths, how about we delve into those for a bit?
Who could it be? Do we have a guest today?
As the Somnium continues to run deeper, you're presented with a choice. You can either cue Komeji to secure the money to get rid of the loan sharks, or forget that and make sure Shoma is safe. Both of these routes show very different sides of Komeji, but the consistencies in his character are a through line that makes sure you know what his prime concern is. Starting with the Shoma route, this one shows the ways that Komeji provided for his son. With everything shown in this route, with all the tough circumstances Komeji's been put through, you see that despite it all, Komeji still carries a want to protect his son, putting that protective desire above all else. Everything he was doing before, with the small amounts of money he was getting, he was always thinking about his son. Even when he took on someone's debt and fell further into the inescapable pit that brings with it, he thought mainly about providing for Shoma. He needed to succeed for his boy. In fact, at the Ferris wheel, you have the option to reminisce. And when you do that, he reminisces about the times he's had with Shoma and the memories they've made. And when push comes to shove, he does what he can to try and protect him. But right at the end of this route, we find an envelope from Horodori Institute, which tells us that Shoma got involved with them behind his father's back.
Shoma! Where did you go? Shoma!
While the Shoma route shows the surface level that Komeji did for protecting his son, the money route really shows the depths that Komeji went to. He made a lot of mistakes, and as a result, he's no longer doing the things he's passionate about. He's practically being held at gunpoint to get everything in his life together, and you can see the toll it's taking on him. His expressions are a lot more static and uninterested, And perhaps the most obvious thing to note is that, on this route, his bow tie disappears entirely. The bow tie that Shoma bought for Komeji. As we find out in an earlier scene, he puts it on or takes it off depending on how he's feeling. So when we go into this route, it's representative of how he's racked with guilt over these dealings. Speaking of metaphors, Komeji states in the other route at the Ferris wheel that he likes things that go in circles. Which probably represents how he likes to keep his life in a stable cycle when he can. Lord knows he's suffered many disruptions in said cycles already. But as he's thrown into the world of black market firearms and shady dealings, the cycle becomes a fierce whirlwind of torment that he just can't escape from.
Going round and round again, Komeji. You're stuck doing laps for us just like this plane ride.
But at the end of this Somnium route, he finds an opening in the form of a mysterious, important thing. He takes it without hesitation. Maybe it was the desperation to get out of this bad cycle and escape the criminal life, or maybe it was something on a bigger scope than that. Uh-oh. But no matter which side you take, even if you choose to chase the money, his son is still his top priority. This isn't just shown in the Somnium, but in the immediate effects after he wakes up. I probably don't even need to discuss Komeji fighting the Horidori goons to get his son back in the Shoma route. I think that alone speaks to his integrity as a father.
This boy is my son! He's more important to me than my own life! I won't let you lay a finger on him!
But in the money route, Komeji wakes up immediately and is able to stop the abduction of his son from happening. He knew it was coming, but wasn't able to wake up in time to immediately stop it on the other route. And in this route, he does stop it, but at the cost of his secrets being exposed and losing his son's respect before his untimely demise.
Dad, you should just die already!
The interesting thing to me is that with this Somnium, the events of the money route are canon no matter what. They're more definitively a reflection of the past, while the Shoma route takes a more emotionally driven turn when that decision to protect him is put at the forefront. Sure, the shady parts are more understated in the Shoma route, probably to prevent spoiling the later twist, but no matter what, Komeji abducted the corpse. I mean, something important. So it's hard to really say how much time he has left after the Shoma route before terror gets his hands on him. The main difference for Komeji in these routes is what's most important to him. His connection with his son. And perhaps the saddest thing of all is that the path intended to progress the story doesn't reconcile this family.
No.
Mr. Komeji, why?
Need Info is such a somber, harrowing dreamscape to run through. For me, it hit all the right spots to break my heart. It's a harsh contrast to the first game's sinking in the Sustine. This one feels a little more solemn. And I know that feels a bit ironic, considering Komeji's a comedian, but like a Ferris wheel breaking down, this Somnium isn't exactly smooth. The condition of the bond is wearing down, it's rickety, and in the worst case scenario, it can come off its hinges entirely. It's not the most complex Somnium, or even the most nuanced, but it plays its cards in such a way that not only made it one of my favorites to revisit and analyze, but also made Komeji one of my favorite characters in the Somnium Files games. But we're not done here. I still have another Somnium I want to cover. Even if it's not necessarily part of the main timeline, I feel that without covering it, the story is only half, and it needs to be whole. So join me next time as we cover the other half of this relationship, the heart of nested insecurities.